Tomorrow's Veterans Day. So when we got our sermon shifted, because originally Pastor Sy was supposed to be gone last week and this week, but they had to change their schedule. So I'm here on Veterans Day, and since I'm an Air Force veteran, I'm going to pick on the Air Force a little bit today. I've heard many Christians, unfortunately more than I like, say we shouldn't be honoring those who kill others. We do honor our veterans. David honored his veterans. In 2 Samuel 23, the entire chapter is dedicated to honoring his soldiers, his warriors, his leaders. 1 Chronicles 11 does the same thing. It's a full chapter, or a full chapter of nothing but honoring the veterans. So it is biblically correct to honor the veterans that served our country. Honoring those who fight for our freedom and safety is reinforced in the Bible. And our call to worship this morning, Wayne read part of what he read was Psalm 144 verse 2, which tells us that God trains us for war. Now, that was written in the Old Testament, and they were talking about the war between men. God trains us, especially here, for war against the dark and evil one, against Satan. So what can we learn from our veterans that would help us as Christians to grow? When Dwight D. Eisenhower was president, how many of you remember Ike? That's what I was afraid of. When he was president, he received a letter from a young man in Connecticut, a young boy. He was about 8 years old. And he had been listening to the news, and he sent a letter to the president that said, "After listening to the news about the Cold War, I'm worried about the people in the world. And thinking it over, I have a plan. Get all the leaders together who want war, put them in a ring, and let them fight it out. Quit involving the rest of the world." I think that's a great idea. As a combat veteran, I know there's a lot of other guys that feel the same way. You do not want to be there. War is a terrible thing. And yet it seems like it's inevitable in our world today. How many wars do we know of going on right now? There's battles, there's wars, there's rumors of wars, and we'll get to that verse here in a minute. Matthew 24:6. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. How many of us, every time we hear about Israel getting attacked, or the Ukraine and Russia, or the possibility that China might attack us, or that North Korea is going to attack South Korea, do we get all worried and alarmed? Christ tells us not to be alarmed. For these things, we should not be alarmed. I'm sorry, I lost my place here. Okay. For such things must happen, but the end is yet to come. Now, a lot of biblical commentators will say, well, Christ was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And he may well have been. But there's others that agree that he was talking about the second coming. It could also be a sign of the second coming. So we should be, in a certain extent, welcoming war, because that means Christ is just that much closer. General Sherman once said, "You don't know the horrible aspects of war. I've been through 2 wars, and I know. I've seen cities and homes in ashes. I've seen thousands of men lying on the ground, their dead faces looking up to the skies. I tell you, war is hell." I disagree slightly with General Sherman. I've been there. War is hellish. Nothing compares to hell from what I've read in the Bible. What we see here on this earth is not going to touch what people are going to go through in hell. World War II was perhaps the most expensive war in men and dollars what we ever fought. World War II cost approximately $4 trillion in today's money. It involved about 1.7 billion people from 61 countries. At that time, that was about 3/4 of the population of the world. That's a lot of people that were affected directly. And that does not count the 5 to 6 million that were Jews that were killed in the Holocaust. There was approximately 50 to 85 million people killed outside of the Jews during World War II. Only about 25 million were military. The rest of it was civilian. That means somewhere to 30 to 50 million people that were not directly involved in the conflict died because of the conflict. Pages are sticking together, sorry. It's nice to have notes, but if the pages don't flow, it makes it tough. Back to talking about veterans. It's the veteran, not the preacher, who gives us freedom of religion. It's the veteran, not the reporter, that gives us freedom of press. It's the veteran, not the poet, that gives us freedom of speech. It's the veteran, not the lawyer, who gives us the right to a fair trial. It's the veteran, not the politician, who gives us the right to vote. Did you vote Tuesday? I hope you did. It's the veteran who salutes the flag and who serves under that flag. I know I've talked to most of the veterans in this room, and we all feel pretty much the same way. Today we honor all of our armed forces veterans. To you, veterans, we owe a debt of gratitude because you were willing to go to serve and to give on behalf of the United States. And may God bless each of you. Now, there's a few things we can learn from our veterans in growing our Christian life. Obey the commander. Our president has authority. He is the commander-in-chief of our armed forces. Where we may not agree with everything that he says or does, as servicemen and as veterans, we should support him. And as Christians, we should pray for him, that he makes the decisions that God is in God's will. There once was an arrogant, I remember this guy, an Air Force major. He got promoted to lieutenant colonel. He got a new office. First day in his office, he had just gotten in, hadn't had a chance to really get settled in, and a young airman knocked on the door and asked to come in. And the colonel, being the type of person he was, reached over, grabbed his phone, trying to impress somebody, probably himself, picked up the phone and goes, "Yes, sir, General. I'll make sure and mention that to the president this afternoon. Yes, sir, goodbye." And he hung up the phone and he turned and barked at the airman, which officers are known to do. "What do you want?" And the airman said, "Well, not much, sir. I'm just here to hook up your phone." Payback's a wonderful thing. Some people have authority. Some people want to have authority. We need to watch that we have the authority to do what we do. And I don't care, I think Louis will agree with me, I don't care what authority I'm given as long as it's from God. The authority I'm given from man is meaningless compared to the authority we receive from God. Shortly after joining the Navy, picking on you, Wayne, a recruit asked his officer for a pass to attend a wedding. Officer said, "Why, certainly, I can do that for you, Seaman. Only thing is, you got to be back by 7 p.m. on Sunday night." And the recruit said, "But sir, I don't think you understand. I'm in the wedding. And the officer looked at him and said, no, you don't understand. You're in the Navy. You don't have a choice in the military. You are not, it's not what works for you, it's what works for the military. And if you have to be back at 7 p.m., don't be AWOL. Obey the commands, whether they're written or verbal. The second thing we have to do is engage the enemy. An 18-year-old stole a police car in Seattle, took it for a joyride. A police officer on a bike spotted the car, called it in. Another police car came up and began pursuit. Lost the car at an intersection when the pursuing car slowed down to make sure the intersection was clear. Before it could take off, a third car rammed him. The two guys in the first car thought they were being attacked, jumped out, pulled their weapons, and started firing at the other car. The driver of the other car jumped out and started firing at them. 20 rounds were exchanged before they realized they were shooting at each other, that they were all officers on duty. As a church, we have an enemy, Satan. We don't need to be shooting bullets at each other. We need to be shooting bullets, making our work against the enemy, whoever that enemy is, wherever we encounter him. There was a young man that once wrote home and said, I'm in boot camp. This world's a shock to me. I don't know what to do. Because when you're in the military, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's 24/7. There are no breaks. Did you ever get breaks, Wayne? No, not in boot camp especially. You were on duty, period. Patsy Claremont, who is a well-known Christian motivational speaker, or author, I'm sorry, once was on a plane, and as she sat down next to a young man, he called her ma'am, and she wasn't sure whether he was referring to her that way because of her age, or because he was from the South, or possibly he was in the military. She kind of figured since there was no accent, and he seemed like a polite young man, that it was because he was in the military. So she asked him, and he said, yeah, I'm in the military. And she said, what branch? He said, well, I'm a Marine. Oh, where are you coming back from? He said, Desert Storm. Oh, how long you been gone? Oh, about 1 year and 4 months. That's a long time. Trust me, a year in Vietnam was a long time. 1 year and 4 months would have been that much longer, and it is no fun. She says, you must be looking forward to seeing your family. And he said, yeah, they're going to meet me at the airport. The whole family's going to be there. Well, you must have missed them quite a bit while you were gone. He said, no, ma'am. And she looked at him and said, why not? And he said, sir, ma'am, we are trained not to think about what may never be, but where we are, and that we're involved in the moment where we are. You think about that, that means he couldn't be concerned. His training wouldn't let him be concerned about what was going on back here, or with his mom, his dad, his siblings, possibly his wife and children, I don't know. He had to be in the moment, in the battle. You got to have a plan of attack is the fourth thing. Can you imagine, just try to imagine, what would have happened if we hadn't had a plan on D-Day? It was called Project Overlord. And it was a group of generals that came up with the plan. But can you imagine if we hadn't had a plan? If we had just said, well, we're going to send a bunch of troops over there. Let them figure out what to do when they hit the beach, or when they hit the cliffs, or wherever they were landing at. Do you think we would have gotten very far? How about the Japanese when they hit Pearl Harbor? Do you think they had a plan? Now, the Japanese didn't complete their plan, and that was a mistake for them. They had a plan, and they initiated that plan. And then an admiral said, well, you know what, we've done a lot of damage, and I don't want to risk any men. We got away pretty light. We didn't lose very many planes or men, so we're going to cancel the last part of the plan. They left enough warships for this country to solidify a counteroffensive and eventually defeat the Japanese in the Pacific. They pulled a similar thing, just an FYI, at Midway when they didn't complete what they started. So there's 4 things we can learn from our veterans. Obey the commander, engage the enemy wherever you run into him, fight to the end, like the Marine was taught to fight and not worry about home. You need to fight to the end, and you need a plan of attack. Who's our commander? Don's back there pointing up. Christ is our commander. We're in the army. We enlisted, if you don't know it, you enlisted in the army of Christ. If you're a Christian, you volunteered. Now, Wayne was Navy, he volunteered. I was Air Force, I volunteered. Don, did you get drafted or did you volunteer? Volunteer. You were volunteer, okay. Some guys weren't that lucky. Some guys got drafted. We avoided that, right, Wayne? But no, they got drafted, but they served. In the army of Christ, there are no draftees, the way we consider a draftee. We're all volunteers. We all accepted that assignment. In Luke 6:46, Christ said, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" Can you imagine if the military people disobeyed the presidential orders? The orders of the generals, the colonels, the captains, the senior enlisted personnel that have authority over them. Can you imagine the chaos that would ensue in the military? If we don't listen to Christ, he can't bring order to our lives. We have to listen to Christ. He guides us step by step. God gives us the scripture as a guide, as a method of teaching, and to be taught by it. And we need to follow the book. We need to listen to our commanders. Remember that the Navy officer with the recruit that wanted to go to the wedding? I can hear Christ saying, "No, you don't understand. You're in the army of Christ." When Christ has a commitment for you to pick up and take, you need to pick it up and run with it until you're done with it, until you've finished it, until the end. Engage the enemy. We Christians are at war. We're at war with Satan, the ruler of this world, the ruler of the air. Now that's a scary thought. He's the ruler of the air. He rules this world. But what have we got to stand against him? We've got Christ and we've got God. Who's going to stand? Do you think Satan's got a fighting chance if we listen and we engage the enemy? If we attack, put up a counteroffensive if we have to? Because there's times when Satan attacks us and we go, "Oh, wait a minute." No. Don't let him back you up more than a step. If Satan attacks, go on the counteroffensive. The word's here for you, the scripture. You can use it. You can call Louis. You can call me. You can call Wayne. You can call Joyce. How about you if you called Diane? She'd do everything she could to help you. Because we're Christians and we work together. And we have Christ leading us, and he tells us to work together to support one another. And we need to do that more often. Ephesians 6:12 tells us, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the power of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." We fight the enemy by doing the faith stuff. One of the references I used had that faith stuff, and I like that. What's your faith stuff? What do you use? What do you rely on when you call on Christ? How do you call on him? How do you get his message? What's your faith stuff? What gives you the support you need to get through whatever it is Satan's throwing at you? Matthew 10:22 says, "All men will hate you because of me, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved." Who doesn't want to fight to the end? If you don't want to fight to the end, you shouldn't be here, because it's not going to do you any good. Paul, on the day he died, took I'll call it a confession, saved a man, brought a man to Christ the day he died, the day that Paul died. That's faith to the end, and that's serving to the end. And we should all be serving to the end. Matthew 24:12 through 14 says, "Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." We have to endure. We have to endure. There's no two ways about it. God has put it before us. We have a job to do. We have the Great Commission. We can watch for the signs for the end times. We have a job to do. Until then, we're supposed to be doing our job. The Great Commission tells us that we are to spread the word so that others may hear of Christ. And there's lots of ways to do that. I'm not sure how each of you do it. I know how Louis does it. I know how Marilyn does it. I know how Wayne does it and Joyce, because I talk to them on a pretty regular basis. But some of you folks, I know that you're here on Sundays. Unfortunately, I don't get to see you during the week much. So how are you putting the gospel of Christ out there? You can do it just by your actions. You can do it by witnessing. You can do it by coming up here and doing what I'm doing. You can preach. You can sing praises to the Lord. People are surprised when you sing a gospel song. I was whistling a song I went down to Walmart in Alliance the other day. I was whistling Amazing Grace. Some lady come up to me and said, "I've heard that tune before. What is it?" I couldn't believe she didn't know. To me, that just wasn't comprehensible. I said, "It's Amazing Grace." And she goes, "Oh, yeah, that's one of those church songs, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's one of many great songs that, we do in churches." And so it gave me the opportunity to witness. It gave me the opportunity, and I thank God for it, to tell somebody else what Christ can do for them because of what he's done for me. And trust me, if Christ hadn't been in my life, I wouldn't be up here doing this. 10 years ago, here in about a month, 10 years ago, I got a new heart. Had I not been with Christ, I would not have gotten that new heart. And I would not be standing here today, because the heart that I had was down to putting out 15%. First Timothy 6:12 tells us to fight the good fight for the faith. Take hold of the eternal life to which we were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses. Now, my salvation came at a Billy Graham revival in the Los Angeles Coliseum. If you've ever seen pictures of the Coliseum, it was pretty well stuffed in August of 83, or 63, I mean, when he did his revival. So when it says many witnesses, I can't count them all. But there was a lot of people that were on their knees and down on the field that night accepting Christ. And there was a lot of witnesses to that happening. Keeping up with where you're at. A young recruit turned his nose up at Army stew. I don't care what branch it is. If it's stew, I'm going to turn my nose up at it. He complained to the mess sergeant about it. Don't I have a choice? I don't like this. Don't I have a choice? Mess sergeant turned to him and said, sure you do. Take it or leave it. Christ gave us that choice. Take it or leave it. If you're here, I'll make the assumption you took it. I know I did. Terry did. Norma did. Judy did. I know that those people have taken that commitment. They didn't leave it. If you left it, or if you haven't taken it, you need to think about it. You need to feel the presence of God drawing on you. We're called to fight a war, not sit around and gripe. Not to gripe about what we don't like about something, or about this person or that person. We're here to fight a war against Satan and to bring people to Christ. Now, the following is attributed to Gentleman Jim Corbett. If there's more than 4 people in this room that know who Gentleman Jim is, I'll be surprised. He was a great boxer back in the day. He usually won by knockout. One person asked him, how is it that you're able to fight so long? And he said, I have one thing on my mind. One more round. Just one more round. And when I get through that round, if my legs are hurting, I'll go one more round. If my lip's bloody, I'll go one more round. And by the time I get to the time when I'm ready to give up that one more round, the fight's over. Because my opponent has been worn down. How many rounds have you gone with Satan? I talked about the plan of attack for the different World War II battles. And then Joe Louis, who was also a heavyweight boxing champion, was approached one time and asked, how is it that he beats his opponents so often? He says, I do 2 things. I study my opponent until I know him better than he knows himself. Have you thought at all about what Satan is like? How devious? What his modus operandi, his method is to get to you? Don't worry about how he gets to me. Worry about how he gets to you. Think about how he gets to you. That's what you've got to defend. That's what you've got to fight off as his attack on you. Then you can help someone else fight his attack on them. And then he made a plan of attack. We're back to that plan of attack. Do you have, I know I'm going over this again, do you have a plan of attack? How are you going to go after Satan? Oh, wait a minute, I was saying Satan comes after you. Now I'm telling you to go after Satan. Have you ever charged Satan? Have you ever even thought about taking the battle to Satan? That's kind of scary. When I was writing this, I'm going, I wonder, in my mind, I'm going, how many people have ever thought about how do I go after Satan before he goes after me, or goes after somebody else, or uses me to weaken their resolve? And that's a scary thought too, because our actions do affect other people, and we do affect the spirituality of other people. So we have to be self-controlled. The Christian life is not a matter of coming to church on Sunday morning and then forgetting all the faith for the rest of the week. It's like that new recruit. You're 24/7. You're in Christ's army. It's 24/7, every day, 365 or 366, depending on the year, from now until the end, whenever that end is. In Timothy, again, 4:7, 2 Timothy, it says, I have fought the good fight. Ask yourself, have you fought the good fight, or do you need to work on it? This is going to be a short sermon because I'm already to my summary. John Stuart Mill, where's Simon? A philosopher from London, England. He died in 1873, but he said war is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling is much worse. The person who has nothing for which he is willing to fight is miserable. What do you have to fight for? What is your purpose? The veterans that are here today from our armed forces felt that the fight for freedom was worthwhile. It was worth their sacrifice. We all signed, as veterans, we signed a receipt to the people of this country that says, basically, I will pay the price up to and including my life to defend the freedom of this country. Obviously, if we're here, we didn't have to make that sacrifice, but many of our friends did. Would you make that commitment to Christ? He tells you you're going to be hated, you're going to be persecuted. Have you made that kind of commitment to Christ? I was a Christian for years before I finally came to the realization I hadn't completed my commitment. I followed what the book said, but I hadn't fully committed to that point, to where I was willing to say, hey, I got to keep my hands off. Lord, you do what you need to do with me. It took me a long time to get there, but when I got there, I felt so good. I knew I had done the right thing. I knew I was where God wanted me. So just remember to follow what our veterans have had to do, and we'll be in great shape. That's obey your commander-in-chief, which is Christ. Engage the enemy, like the young recruit under the that had to fight 24/7. Fight to the end like the Marine, the young Marine, and have a plan of attack. Especially know your enemy and be prepared to do battle with him. Like I said, short sermon today, Louis. I want God to bless all the veterans here today. I want God to bless all of the Christian veterans, Army of Christ veterans, which I hope all of you are. This congregation has come to be my family. I spend a lot of time here, and I love it. Teamwork, as Louis and I worked together yesterday, or Louis and Norma and Amherst and I worked together yesterday getting things done here for the church, for our family. We hope you'll join our family. We hope you'll join Christ, our Christian family. That's all I've got to say. God bless you, veterans.